Hi, Graham here from the TELUS Alliance, and today I'm going to show you how you can quickly and easily build new AudioTools Server workflows using our AudioTools WorkflowCreator application. To illustrate this, I'm going to show you how you can use WorkflowCreator to build a workflow that takes a stereo WAV file, upmixes it to 5.1, loudness corrects the audio, and encodes it as a Dolby E track. To start, I'm going to click on New Workflow to create a new blank workflow. The new workflow has a couple of mandatory steps, workflow start and workflow complete, but basically everything in between is entirely down to you. To start adding the steps to the workflow, I need to first open the module toolbox. This gives me a list of all the available module options and covers a wide range of different AudioTools Server modules and processes. In this particular workflow, my source is a stereo WAV file that I need to convert to 5.1, so I'm going to go to the Upmix category and drag an instance of the Upmix module onto the workflow canvas, which I'll then drop over one of the available step slots. The new step is automatically connected to the one before it. You'll notice that the added step has a red status indicator in the upper corner. This tells me that it has some parameters that need configuring, which I'll do now by double-clicking on it. Step controls are organized into input parameters and output parameters. Input parameters are used to configure the behavior of the step and will include things like what are the input files, what are my upmix settings, what are my loudness targets. Whereas output parameters define the available output options from the step and will include things like the output file path or any results produced by the step that you may want to use as inputs to other steps later in the workflow. In terms of this upmix step, the first thing I need to select is the source file, which in this case is going to be my original source. Moving to the actual upmix controls, this particular module can upmix configurations up to 916. However, in this instance, I'm just looking at the default 5.1 option. The rest of the settings I'm going to leave as they are for now. Scrolling down, I have the option to choose whether the output of this step will be a temporary file or a deliverable file. A temporary file will, as the name implies, only exist for the lifespan of the workflow and will be deleted when the workflow finishes its processing. A deliverable file represents a final output from the workflow which will be saved in the user-defined output directory. There are no limits to how many deliverable files you can create in a workflow, so if, for example, I wanted to have both the upmixed audio and the Dolby E encoded audio as separate outputs, I can. In this case, I'm fine with the temporary option. Looking at the output parameters, any parameter that I want the step to output will need to be given a display name, which I can use to reference it in later steps. In this instance, I'm just going to define a name for the output file option. I'll now click on OK to confirm the changes. Notice that the status indicator has now changed to green. That's the upmix step configured. I'm now going to add the other steps to the workflow. In this case, loudness processing and Dolby E encode 5.1. Opening the loudness processing step, I'm going to select the upmixed audio that I configured earlier as my input, and I also need to update the audio configuration to 5.1. When it comes to configuring the loudness settings themselves, I can either manually select the values that I need. For example, I could set my target loudness to -24 and my peak to -2, or I can pick from one of the available presets. Selecting EBU R128, for example, will automatically adjust the values to those required to meet this specification. Scrolling down, for reasons we'll see later, I'm going to enable the final measurement option. I'm going to leave the output file option as temporary and jump to the output parameters section, where I'll need to give my output file a reference name. I'm also going to enable the final program loudness option and give that a name too. Okay, that's all done. Moving to the last step in my workflow, Dolby E encode 5.1, I'm going to select the output of my loudness step as the source file, and as this is the last step in this workflow, I'm going to change the output file option to deliverable file. You'll notice that when I do this, some additional options appear where I can potentially define a suffix to be added to the output file. I'm going to enable this option and add the suffix Dolby E. Next, I have the option to configure the different Dolby E metadata settings. On this occasion, I'm going to leave most of them as per their default, but I am going to adjust the dial norm value. For this, I could either manually enter a value, or I can click on the bind button and select the 5.1 final program loudness option I defined in the last step. Binding allows you to drive parameters in one step using outputs from another step. You'll notice that when I clicked on bind, the setting type changed from a number box to a drop-down menu, and a blue box appeared around it. If I want to go back to the manual option, I simply click on the unbind button. As this is the last step in my workflow, it's optional whether I define the output file output parameter or not, and in this instance I'm just going to disable it, meaning the workflow will ignore this option. Now that all the steps are added and configured, I'm going to connect the Dolby E step to the workflow complete one, closing out the workflow. Finally, let me give this workflow a name. And I'm going to save the changes. And there it is. We're now ready to start processing files. I hope you found this demo interesting. We look forward to seeing you for more AudioTools Server videos very soon. Bye for now.